Okay, let's talk a little bit about drugs. Illicit, hardcore, employer pharmaceuticals. They're killing us, folks. It's incredible how much pharmaceuticals have gone up over the years. So, real quick, this isn't going to be a short one. I always say it's going to be a quick video. This one will not be a quick video because I'm going to go through quite a bit here. But we're going to talk about the RX landscape, how drugs are approved in America, and the kind of research we don't do to approve those drugs. We're going to talk about America's real drug addiction. It's not fentanyl. We're going to talk about Johnson and Johnson. A little bit of the rebate rampage, managing that rebate rampage or rebate rapture, pulling it all together, and then it's me. So we got to have some memes. We'll end with a chuckle. Hopefully, we'll learn a little something, laugh a little bit, have a good time. So right now in America, 2024 is a projection based upon the growth, the inflation coming on from last year. We're going to spend about $480 billion in 2024. That's 5 times what we spent on RX all the way back in 2020. We're spending anywhere from about $120 to $140 per person per month across the country. Employer groups are typically more between 80 and 120, 80 and 130 per person per month or per member per month, not per employee per month. And now drugs are typically about 20 to 40% of an employer's claim cost. When this system was put in place years ago, it was only about 3% of the claim cost. So we definitely have very significant cost inflation going on with respect to the RX portion. This is just kind of fun because I was 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago now, a couple coworkers and I and a client were down in Mexico. We actually started in Yuma, Arizona, drove down to San Luis, Arizona, which is a tiny little town on the border. But then when you cross over, there's like a couple 100,000 people in San Luis, Mexico. It's a pretty common border crossing point for snowbirds and seniors that want to get their medications and get medical treatments and dental treatments for significantly cheaper in Mexico. I mean, significantly. So I have the amounts here. It was incredibly easy too. You only needed a driver's license to get back into America. You didn't even need any kind of passport. But so I literally we were driven down to the border and dropped off right at the border, so we didn't have to like go through the automobile line to get through. And we walked across and then had somebody pick us up on the other side as well. But even before, I didn't have to get into a vehicle. It was like a 5-minute cross, walking across. And the first pharmacy we came to was clean and nice and professional and well run. And so we went in, and I just thinking quickly, Trulicity was one of the drugs they had on stock that I thought we could compare. And there it is, folks. Had I had a Trulicity prescription with me, I could have got it for $145, where, 5 minutes away, a 5-minute walk onto the other side of the border, it would have been just about $1,000. Crazy. 85% reduction in Mexico versus America. Now, I was down in the great, well-run, pristine country of Mexico because we have a client down on the border who has roughly half of their employees going in and out of Mexico on a daily basis, coming across on visas, work visas. So we're putting in a panel of providers along the border, various clinics, access to hospitals, private clinics, pharmacy, et cetera. So this employer is going to save a ton of money because what we learned is that in Mexico, everything's about 1/6 to 1/10 of what it costs in America. And that's true for like food, wages, housing, and of course, healthcare. Actually, it's more like 1/10 for healthcare. One other fun stat that you'll appreciate: when we reference base price plans here in America, we usually on average pay 140% of Medicare. In Mexico, our employees that go and receive that treatment there in the clinics in Mexico, they will be at roughly 40% of Medicare for that treatment. And all of the clinics and hospitals to which our employees will go, are staffed by doctors and nurses that would equally be licensed to practice in America as well. I was actually, honestly, seriously impressed with the private clinics that we visited. And the hospitals in Mexicali are quite new and quite nice. In fact, one of the executives that runs this Mexican network, he has dual citizenship. He was born and raised in Yuma. He made it incredibly clear that if anything happens to him, he wants to either go to a hospital in Mexicali or in Phoenix. He didn't trust any of the American hospitals between the border and Phoenix without naming any specific names. Okay, so how are drugs approved in America? Of course, you know, we're this pristine nation with all of these rules and regulations, so I'm sure that we do a fantastic job to make sure that drugs are approved and that they're done in a very ethical, fantastic fashion, right? Okay, so first question, is the drug safe? The drug has to be safe for the FDA to approve it. And of course, if it's safe, then that's the first step. Second step, is the drug better than a placebo? Okay, so we don't want to approve a drug that doesn't actually do anything, right? Sugar pills. So that's the second step we have to have for drug approval in America. And the third step for drug approval in the great United States of America is the drug better than other drugs on the market used to treat the same or similar conditions? I'm a liar. That is not a condition. No. Unlike every other developed nation in the world, the United States does not use what we call comparative effectiveness research to determine whether or not this drug is worthy of approval. Is it actually any better than the cheaper drugs we've already got? We don't do that. Instead, we approve it as long as it meets those first two criteria. Is it safe? Is it better than nothing? Then we approve it. It's up to those of us in the market to determine whether or not this drug is actually worthy of our extra dollars and money. And this fact is mind-numbing to me because a recent study showed that 73% of doctors didn't even know this. That's right. Doctors thought comparative effectiveness research was done before approving drugs here in America. No, 3/4 of doctors did not even know that we don't do that. We just require the drug to be better than nothing. Okay, so America's real drug addiction, what I like to call fentanyl for Wall Street. So in America, we spend $6 billion a year on direct-to-consumer advertising for pharmaceuticals. So all those commercials we see, that purple pill that allows you to throw the football through the tire in a very tight rope line, linear, erect fashion. That's the $6 billion we spend annually on direct-to-consumer advertising, and we see it, and we know that's a huge expenditure. But oh no, it's really not much at all. It's a drop in the bucket because, in fact, we also spend $24 billion per year advertising directly to doctors, sending in all those handsome square-jawed gentlemen and those perky, wonderful, beautiful ladies to doctors' offices with all kinds of gifts and wonderful glossy brochures and all kinds of fancy things and trips and tickets and everything else. That's $24 billion a year. So when you think about all the drug advertising you see, which is effectively what keeps cable news alive, by the way, cable news is there to sell us drugs. It's really not even there to give us news anymore because nobody watches it because it's all fake, right? It's a cheerleader for one side or the other. It's not actual news. I digress. All right, so we spend 4 times that amount advertising directly to doctors. Seems efficient, right? But folks, that's nothing. That is nothing compared to what we spend on rebates. That's right. Legalized kickbacks. $223 billion a year. Yeah. So remember that 490 billion number I shared on the first slide? That was the net cost of what we spend on drugs after Big Pharma dishes out $223 billion in kickbacks to incentivize the use of their most expensive drugs. That's right. 1/3 of US RX spend is spent on advertising and kickbacks. Doesn't that seem so efficient? Okay. had to play around with this meme a bit to get it right. I think I have it right now. If you haven't heard, and again, not all of you are benefit geeks and attorneys like me, so I totally expect that you probably haven't heard. In the last couple of months, Johnson & Johnson has been sued as violating their ERISA obligation to ensure they're not wasting money on their health plan. So it's an employee, actually a group of employees now, I think. I believe it's turned into a class action. And it's basically saying, you, Johnson & Johnson, have done such an incredibly horrible job at managing our prescription drug program that we're going to sue you because you're not looking out for our costs. You're not complying with your fiduciary obligation to keep our costs down. And so that is going to make its way through the court system. I think we're going to see a lot more of these in the future. The details of this suit are egregious. I mean, it was like, I'm going to have the numbers off, but it was roughly, this particular patient was paying roughly $1,000 for a prescription that they could have gotten for less than $100 just through like on the internet without using the plan at all. And trust me, you think that's rare? It's not. That kind of garbage is embedded in a lot of plans nationwide. And so Johnson & Johnson's getting sued for it. So the meme is when industry pricing is so predatory that you're sued for buying the very product you sell. Pharmaceuticals, right? Yeah, that's nasty, folks. Don't want to be a part of that. Okay, so rebate rampage. It's a gas. Grab that cash with both hands and make a stash. So an RX rebate is just, it's a form of price concession, or what I like to call it, what it really is, kickback, paid by the pharmaceutical industry. The manufacturers specifically to insurance companies, pharmacy benefit managers, and others in the US. These rebates are used to influence the inclusion of specific drugs on the formularies, i.e. the list of drugs the PBM wants to make available to you, the consumer. And these rebates are used basically to bribe PBMs to add drugs onto the formulary list. So who feeds at the trough of rebates? Well, PBMs, certainly, pharmacy benefit managers, insurance companies, absolutely. Large brokerages with exclusive RX contracts for the benefit of the little guy, right? Now, when you have a brokerage that's coming to you and saying, oh, we've got a special deal with RX something or other, one of the big three, typically one of the big three RX companies that control 80% of the drugs in the United States, it's typically because they're getting a rebate, or they're getting a PEPM every time there's a prescription filled. They're getting a kickback. They're getting compensation. Now, here's the deal. The CAA mandates they have to be disclosing that to you now. And my guess is a lot of them aren't. So that's something to be looking out for is, do you have this wonderful large purchasing pool arrangement where you're buying your drugs from one of the three monopolies that effectively control all of drugs in the United States? If so, you better make sure that the consultant that's selling you that wonderful deal is disclosing every nickel they're taking out of your drug plan. That's right. They're taking money out of your drug plan. So same thing with TPAs. A lot of third-party administrators also get paid when you use their special contract with X Corp Wellness or RX company. They get paid a few nickels, right? They want to get paid every time your people have to take drugs. And then with the leftovers that trickle down, the little bit of rebates that are left, employers are sometimes given some of those rebates on self-funded plans. Now, I overstate this a bit. There are some free market PBMs out there that swear up and down they do not take rebates. They pass 100% of them through. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Make sure you're only working with one of those. If you're fully insured, there's nothing you can do about it. They're gobbling those rebates down, just like the cartoon on the lower right there. And again, I just be incredibly leery about a brokerage that talks to you about their fantastic RX contract and how they're going to score you the greatest deal ever. A good broker should make nothing. And again, whether we call ourselves brokers, consultants, agents, advisors, that's the one now that everybody likes, advisor, right? like I'm the eunuch on Game of Thrones whispering in somebody's ear and I don't actually do anything. Fine, I'm an advisor, I'm a lawyer, whatever I am. I don't make money on your drugs. That's ridiculous. So be really leery of that. And if they're not disclosing it, let's talk, because the CAA is here and Johnson & Johnson is evidence that this stuff is coming right now. Okay. Rebates in real life, man. I made this meme a while back and I love it. It's just, the patient is just embarrassed, right? He's the PBM and the insurer over there just swapping spit, deeply in love with each other. And the patient's like, all right, can I just get my drugs now, please? So why are rebates in real life not a good deal? Well, the patients don't get the rebates. Now, I get it. The whole idea is that the rebates can indirectly lower insurance premiums in future years, but that's philosophically true, and it can happen, and it probably does happen at some degree. It's not the reality. The reality is when the patient has a high deductible plan or they have large copays, they're showing up and they're paying full boat, and those rebates are trickling back to the employer 9 months later. Okay, so ridiculous. And then that gets me to the second bullet. Why are rebates kind of a joke? Why are they ridiculous? Why do we not want them in our health plans if we can avoid it? Because the time value of money. You're paying these huge high prices now in hopes for rebates 6 to 9 months down the road, which, and of course, with inflation at 1,000,000% in the USA, that's a bad deal, right? We don't want that when the government is printing money like there's no tomorrow. And then just there's plenty of reasons why these are not the best way to manage a drug plan, but the resource allocation, the need to manage this complex system, it's just ridiculous. The whole thing is done to bribe you to put, you being PBMs, to bribe PBMs to put the highest cost, newest drugs on the formularies, and then to obfuscate and make this thing as translucent and not transparent as possible, to make it so that you have a hard time even knowing how much money you're paying for things. And so now you've got to have experts and professionals to manage the rebate farming, to make sure it's done properly, et cetera. It's just a big, sloppy, nasty mess when you have the PBM and the insurer over there just slobbering on each other. Okay, so how do you manage the rebate rapture? Well, one way you do it, and I think honestly the most important way you do it, is with comparative effectiveness research. It's a branch of healthcare research that focuses on how well various medicines work in the real world, not in the lab, not highfalutin ivory tower stuff. This is looking at, in the real world, under real conditions, how do these drugs work? Now, why aren't we doing this? Because this is a huge moneymaker for giant corporations, private equity, and Wall Street. That's the reality. And when 1/3 of the entire drug spend in the United States is this enormous pile of money that's sloshing around, do you think they really want to get involved in what's the best drug to use? Or do you think they really, at their core, everybody that's getting paid in this system, that what they want is, let's use the drugs with the highest rebates, right? So comparative effectiveness research, which is done in every other first world nation, and it's done in most of our universities in the United States, shows you which drugs actually work. And it plots them on this chart. So I'm just giving you a sample here of the blank chart. On the up and down, the vertical axis, you can see the higher you plot something is, the more the drug costs. On our x-axis, going out horizontally, is how effective the drug is. So what we want is something that's low cost and effective, right? And that would be what I've shaded here in green. Now, of course, there's going to be drugs that are expensive, but also effective. We shade those in yellow. And then there's going to be drugs that are not very effective and also high cost. Those are in red. And then, of course, bottom left quadrant, orange, light orange in this case, is drugs that are low cost, but also not very effective. So your pharmacy program, and we are able to put these in place for our clients now, should be doing this, should be looking at these drugs and saying, okay, you want to take one of these new GLP-1 drugs that was designed for type 2 diabetes, but is now showing that it has some success with weight loss. You know what I'm talking about, right? Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, all the fancy names, right? Those are all $1,000, give or take. They're all right around $1,000 a month. And I'll tell you, some of them are in the yellow and some of them are in the red. Some of them don't work well at all. In fact, if we look at those drugs just for management of type 2 diabetes, there are drugs that are down in the green. It's typically when you combine two drugs together that are more effective than all but maybe one of those fancy new $1,000 a month weight loss drugs. That's right. It's all a rage. Roughly 30% of employers are covering those drugs for weight loss, those GLP-1s, and they're paying $1,000 per script. And basically all but one of them is not as effective as much cheaper, older drugs that have been on the market. Now, when I say that, I'm talking about one specific drug combination that's been on the market. Anyway, you get the idea. If this isn't happening on your drug plan, you're failing to profit. And I'll tell you right now, it's probably not happening, because in order to make this happen properly in your drug plan, you have to have a free market-minded consultant, broker, agent, advisor, whatever the heck we're called, and you have to be working with effectively 2 different pharmacy companies. You're not going to be able to do this effectively with one PBM. That's one of the tips here in this presentation. So here's a case study. This is one client, just one typical example of what happened when we went from maximizing rebates to maximizing drug optimization. So you can see here, it's very straightforward. The plan was paying $121 PMPM. This is just for RX, right? Per member per month. The rebates were accounting for $37. So there was a net plan cost of $84 per member per month. Not bad. Certainly the lower end of average in the United States. Now, when we put in our drug optimization model, working with 2 different pharmacy companies, we were able to reduce that initial cost all the way down to $68 per member per month. Why? Because we weren't picking the drugs that had the largest rebates, the newest, the fanciest ones. We were picking the drugs that were, or that are, the most effective for what we're trying to accomplish here. So rebates in this case were crushed all the way down to $4 PMPM, but net cost, $64. Plan cost reduction, $23. Easy to see, right? We want to look at final net cost. We don't want to focus on rebate maximization. We want to focus on the lowest net cost for the most effective drugs. Okay, so pulling it all together, you've got to have a free market transparent PBM that will guarantee they will pass through 100% of all the rebates they receive. This must be in writing in the PBM contract, okay? You can't just, it can't be an oral thing. You have to see this in the documentation. And it should specify that they're going to give you every kind of rebate. Folks, this is a deep pool of corporate greed, and there are so many layers of rebates. I mean, there's drug-specific, manufacturer-specific, volume-based, exclusivity rebates. There's all kinds of stuff going on where they may be giving you most of the rebates, but keeping some, right? So you don't want that. You want an absolute guarantee they're not keeping any rebates on a self-funded plan. Those need to all be flowing back to you. Okay, step 2, that's the number 1 thing you can do. Step 2, it's a little harder on a self-funded plan, but we do it. You're capable of doing this. Separate the control of your formulary from your PBM. The PBM should act more like a TPA does, fulfilling your wishes on the formulary, not by crafting a formulary that affords them the best opportunity to maximize rebates. You maximize the use of high-quality drugs with comparative effectiveness research. When you find the lower cost drugs that work better, make them free or near free to your members. So in other words, if your member is taking one of those $1,000 a month GLP-1s, and it's for, let's say it's for truly for type 2 diabetes, and we can put them on a $45 a month, a cocktail of 2 drugs that work just as well, we make that free to the member so that they're incentivized to make that choice. Add in international sourcing for your drug plan where you can, and you should be able to. You might not be able to with some of the PBMs, but with many of the newer, more agile, free market PBMs, you absolutely can. Break apart specialty fulfillment from your PBM. Specialty is the most, there's no agreed upon definition of specialty drugs in the United States. They're just the most expensive drugs, right? So what we don't want is a PBM to be able to play games with what's in that specialty category and profit therefrom, and also get more rebates therefrom. What we want to do is we want to break it apart. We want specialty fulfillment to come from a different entity. And then finally, use a PBM that will apply for and manage all of the potential low-income programs available from the manufacturers via government cheese programs. That's right. There are so many programs out there where the government is working to, instead of just getting rid of rebates, right, and making this clear, instead the government makes all kinds of government cheese available for folks that have lower incomes. So you need to be using a PBM and a consulting combination that it does all that work for you. And we're out there, folks, that these exist, so that if there is the need for one of these high cost drugs, it could be free or nearly free to a patient who needs it because of their income status. All right, we got to end with some laughter. We always got to end with some laughter. So here's our PBM. We've got the private equity-backed TPA on one shoulder and the national broker with their exclusive PBM contract on the other shoulder. I'm sure this chap is just helping a couple of young homeless ladies with a few dollars for food. I'm sure that's what's going on here. And from Goodfellas, forcing me to watch an employer opt for higher rebates over lower net cost. Thank you much, folks. I appreciate you taking the time here with us. And what do I always say? Oh, yeah. I'll see you at renewal.